Welcome, friends, to another episode of Today in Military Affairs. In this video, we delve into the shocking developments surrounding Russia's new nuclear doctrine, signed into law by Vladimir Putin, and the implications of the US's decision to approve the use of long-range missiles targeting Russian territory. Could these actions push the world to the brink of nuclear war? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay updated on critical global events. Now, let's explore this pressing issue that has the world holding its breath. The war in Ukraine began in February 2022, with Russian troops launching a multi-front invasion aimed at swiftly capturing Kyiv and overthrowing the government of Volodymyr Zelensky. What Moscow expected to be a quick operation turned into a prolonged conflict, marked by fierce resistance, urban warfare, and the devastation of entire cities. Over 1,000 days later, the war has evolved into a grinding battle of attrition, with both sides suffering staggering losses, over 2,000 soldiers daily according to estimates. As Russia continues its slow but relentless advances in key regions like Donetsk, Ukraine fights back with increasing support from Western allies. Beyond the battlefield, the conflict has had a profound impact on civilian life and the global geopolitical landscape. Entire towns and villages have been wiped off the map, displacing millions of people both internally and across borders. Economically, the war has disrupted global supply chains, particularly in energy and agriculture, with ripple effects felt far beyond Ukraine's borders. Politically, the war has galvanized NATO and renewed commitments to collective defense while driving a wedge between nations reliant on Russian energy and those advocating for tougher sanctions. The ramifications of this conflict have extended far beyond Europe, reshaping the very fabric of international relations. The turning point in the conflict came with Western military aid, particularly the delivery of advanced artillery systems like HIMARS. More recently, the US authorized the use of ATACMS long-range missiles, enabling Ukraine to target critical infrastructure deep within Russian territory, including in the strategic CSK region. This decision, while hailed by Kyiv as a vital step forward, has sparked outrage in Moscow. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov condemned the move as adding fuel to the fire, accusing the West of becoming a direct participant in the war. The deployment of ATACMS missiles has significantly enhanced Ukraine's offensive capabilities, allowing strikes on key Russian military assets previously beyond reach. This escalation has intensified the conflict, raising concerns about potential retaliatory measures from Russia and the broader implications for regional stability. In November 2024, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a revised nuclear doctrine, officially titled Basic Principles of State Policy on Nuclear Deterrence. This new policy lowers the threshold for nuclear weapon use, allowing for their deployment in response to conventional attacks supported by nuclear-armed states. The revision follows the US decision to permit Ukraine to use long-range missiles, such as ATACMS, against Russian targets, which Russia claims have struck its Bryansk region. The updated doctrine outlines specific conditions under which Russia may employ nuclear weapons. Retaliatory strikes, in response to ballistic missile launches targeting Russia or its allies. Weapons of mass destruction, if weapons of mass destruction are used against Russia or its allies. Conventional threats, in the face of significant conventional attacks that threaten Russia's sovereignty or territorial integrity. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov emphasized that strikes on Russian territory, especially those involving Western-supplied long-range missiles, could trigger a nuclear response under this revised policy. While US officials have not observed changes in Russia's nuclear posture and have maintained their own strategies, the international community remains concerned about potential escalation stemming from this policy shift. The revision aims to deter Western support for Ukraine, but it also raises the specter of nuclear conflict, underscoring the need for careful diplomatic engagement to prevent further escalation. There are two primary factors behind Putin's decision. Deterrence against Western aid. Moscow hopes to dissuade the US and its allies from supplying increasingly advanced weaponry to Ukraine. By lowering the threshold for nuclear weapons use, Putin aims to introduce a new level of risk calculation for Western leaders, making them reconsider their continued military support for Kyiv. Russia's growing vulnerability. With many of its air defense systems redeployed to protect occupied Ukrainian territories, Russia's interior regions have been left exposed. This vulnerability has become evident as Ukrainian strikes target critical areas like Kursk, Bryansk, and Belgorod, damaging critical infrastructure and undermining public confidence in the Kremlin's ability to defend its territory. Putin's rhetoric has also intensified, with veiled threats to supply long-range weapons to countries like North Korea and Iran, creating a potential global power imbalance. These threats serve as a warning to Western nations, signaling that continued escalation could have far-reaching consequences beyond the Ukraine conflict. Additionally, this shift in nuclear doctrine is likely intended to consolidate domestic support for Putin's administration. By framing the updated policy as a necessary measure to protect national sovereignty and counter Western aggression, the Kremlin seeks to rally the Russian populace around its leadership. This tactic also serves to deflect attention from the economic and political strains caused by the prolonged conflict, bolstering Putin's position both at home and abroad. While experts believe the likelihood of nuclear use remains low due to the catastrophic global consequences, the risk of miscalculation has grown significantly. The continuous strikes on Russian territory and the escalating involvement of Western nations narrow the room for diplomatic resolution. For the Kremlin, the threat of nuclear weapons is as much a political tool as a military one, designed to pressure Kyiv and the West while attempting to consolidate its fragile position at home. Moreover, the ambiguity surrounding the Kremlin's intentions adds to the uncertainty. By refusing to clearly define the circumstances under which nuclear weapons might be used, Putin seeks to create a psychological advantage. This tactic aims to deter Ukraine and its allies from taking bold actions while forcing Western leaders to tread carefully in their support. However, such ambiguity also heightens the risk of unintended escalation, where a misstep by either side could spiral into a catastrophic confrontation. As tensions remain high, the international community faces the daunting challenge of navigating this delicate situation without triggering further instability. The recent election of Donald Trump adds another layer of uncertainty. Trump has expressed a desire to end the conflict quickly but has not outlined how this aligns with Ukraine's needs or Western interests. His return to the presidency could lead to shifts in U.S. policy, potentially altering the dynamics of the war. Would Trump's approach involve concessions to Moscow, or would he double down on supporting Ukraine's defense? The answer could shape the course of the conflict in the coming months. Additionally, Trump's historical emphasis on transactional diplomacy could influence his strategy in Ukraine. He might pursue a deal that prioritizes U.S. economic and strategic interests, potentially at the expense of broader NATO objectives. Such a move could strain alliances, particularly if European nations perceive a shift away from the unified Western stance against Russian aggression. Alternatively, Trump could leverage his unconventional relationship with Vladimir Putin to broker a ceasefire, though this carries the risk of legitimizing Russian territorial gains and undermining Ukraine's sovereignty. Either path introduces significant geopolitical ramifications, making Trump's leadership a pivotal factor in the conflict's trajectory. Over 1,000 days since the war began, the toll has been staggering. Ukraine's resistance has inspired global admiration, but the human and economic costs have been devastating. Cities lie in ruins, millions have been displaced, and the specter of nuclear escalation looms larger than ever. This conflict has reshaped the global order, redefining alliances and reviving the shadow of Cold War-era tensions. As both sides dig in, the next few weeks and months will be pivotal in determining the future of the war, and perhaps the future of global security. The war has also exposed vulnerabilities within the international system, from the limitations of diplomatic channels to the strain on global resources caused by prolonged conflict. Nations that were once neutral are now re-evaluating their positions, with countries like Sweden and Finland joining NATO in response to Russia's actions. Meanwhile, rising inflation, energy shortages, and disrupted supply chains have demonstrated that the war's impact extends far beyond the battlefield. As the crisis deepens, the international community faces mounting pressure to find sustainable solutions while grappling with the growing fear that this conflict could mark the beginning of a more unstable and polarized era in world politics. The path forward is fraught with peril. Decisions made by global leaders in the coming weeks could either de-escalate tensions or push the world toward unprecedented chaos. The stakes have never been higher. As nations grapple with the weight of their choices, the need for effective diplomacy, clear communication, and international cooperation has never been more urgent. The coming weeks could determine not only the trajectory of the Ukraine conflict but also set precedents for handling future global crises. Whether through renewed dialogue or intensified confrontation, the decisions made now will echo for generations to come. If you found this analysis insightful, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you in-depth coverage of the world's most pressing issues. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.